Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And we want to thank you for joining this Techstrong Learning edition of DevOps Unbound, brought to you by Tricentis. My name is Jared Harris, and we want to welcome you back to another Techstrong Learning experience. As always, this session is going to be recorded and will be available on demand. We'll send you a link shortly after the program ends. We want to hear from you through the question section. Any questions that you've got, please direct them over to the right side of your screen in the Q&A section. We've also got a chat section where we want to hear from you, your thoughts, your feedback, your comments, anything you've got throughout the program. We want to hear. Just tell us where you're signing in from at the bare minimum. On the resource side, which should be on the left side of your screen, we've also got some links for you. Take some surveys. Give us your feedback there as well. And finally, we'll be giving 2 attendees a $50 Amazon gift card after today's learning experience is over. So be sure to share your comments, your questions, fill in the chat, and your surveys to become eligible. Let's go ahead and kick off today's program with today's topic, AI skills for development and testing teams. Mitch, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you while I turn off my camera to do introductions.
Very good. Thank you so much, Jared. I wanted to say thank you, Cody. I'll get you unprogrammed from doing that. Cody was helping us with doing some shows for a while there. Hey, welcome everybody. It's great to be here with you. If you aren't familiar with DevOps Unbound, this is actually an ongoing video series we've been doing over 3.5 years now, looking at all aspects of DevOps and platform engineering and SRE and AI and you name it. And something, if it's about creating software, microservices, whatever it might be, we're talking about it on DevOps Unbound. And it's a video series that's available on Techstrong TV. Some of those episodes are recorded, and usually once a month, we get together for a live session, which is what this is, a live roundtable. And same format, we just have a live audience and participating with us. As Jared mentioned, we really encourage your involvement through the chat. Share your comments, your thoughts, your reactions. I have a different perspective. I like that. Here's an idea. Whatever it might be, we want to hear from you because that actually will help shape and contribute and guide the conversation. And of course, Q&A. We'd love to hear your questions and we'll weave those in as we kind of progress in our conversation. So before we get into our topic, AI skills for development and testing teams, I'd like to introduce our amazing panel, some all really great people I've had the opportunity to work with in different capacities and, over recent times. First of all is David. David, would you introduce yourself? Tell us about you, kind of work that you do.
Hi, everyone. My name is David Quintero. I'm the Senior Technical Marketing Manager here at Tricentis, and I work within all of our product line, working on how our products integrate with each other, as well as the entire development life cycle ecosystem, helping customers test the quality of their applications and make sure that you're releasing as quickly and strongly as you can, and really just protecting your products and your brand.
Very good. Michael Levan, welcome. Introduce yourself, please.
Thanks for having me, Mitch. Appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Michael Levan. I do everything and anything in the Kubernetes and platform engineering space. So content creation like blogs, videos, podcasts, written a couple books, consulting. So working with organizations literally all over the world on their Kubernetes and platform engineering projects, and live training. So I do a lot of live training on just about every topic in the DevOps and cloud and Kubernetes realm.
Fantastic. And contributor to Kubernetes.
Yes, that's right.
On that for sure. All right, Lisette, it's good to see you again. Thank you. So great to have you here. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you for having me again. I'm Lisette, and I have about 20 years experience in software development, testing, and QA in general. I am the CEO of Zisware Solution Inc. It's a boutique consulting company that help small business and startup company strategize them really into how to harness the power of AI into the software development, and also using AI to amplify the customer experience lately. So AI is something that I've been doing for at least 15 years now. So I'm excited that it's now at the forefront, and we are talking about it pretty much every day. So excited to be here talking with you guys.
Just a continuation of the conversation we're already having practically, right?
Exactly. Thank you.
Michelle, I think you hold the title of our roving global participant from Mexico City to Switzerland to, I think, are you in Portugal today? Is that right?
Portugal today, yes.
Oh,
today
welcome.
I'm again at an airport waiting for my flight to take off,
There you
going
go.
back home.
We'll wait for
Yes.
that big announcement to come on board that dominates
Yes.
everything and nobody can
Yes.
hear anything, right? Well, introduce yourself, please.
Thank you very much for having me here, Mitch. So I'm Mitch Shelby. I'm a senior software developer at Karakun. I have been involved in testing roles all my life, like in past life as a software developer, and also at the organizational level in the test centers of excellence. On other past life, I also work a lot in DevOps companies and trying to figure out and helping our different customers in to create more of this goodness inside the entire organization and the different teams. AI has something that I also kept an eye for a long time because it was always interesting. And I at that moment when it started, the waves for me it was like this sounds like testing all over around. Like we will go from if I should do it to when should I do it to I must do it.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I want to encourage everybody too that's participating. I pinned at the top of the chat. We have an active Techstrong research project ongoing with Tricentis. We did a report 2 years ago in 2022 on AI augmented DevOps. A lot of what we kind of were anticipating AI might do in terms of how we create software. Some things were already happening with them. Of course, we had TensorFlow and a number of PyTorch and everything's already around, of course. Generative AI, not so much in 2022, at least when that survey was done. So we have a survey at the top. If you would click that link, you can fill it out now, or you can just keep the tab open and fill it out later. We would love everybody to participate. This is how you get to help do research while you do your day job too. So thank you in advance for doing that. And of course, I've mentioned Tricentis a couple of times. David being, of course, with Tricentis. They've been with us doing the show for really since the beginning, and so they're a great partner in creating the opportunity for us to have these conversations. The show's not about Tricentis and their products. It's not about anybody's technology and their products. So we may mention things, which is perfectly fine. It's really an open discussion from all of our different backgrounds. So as Jared mentioned, this is recorded. We'll send a link to everybody that has a recording. Link to the recording so you can replay it, share it with your friends, send it to your mom and dad so they know what you do for a living. No, they still won't know, trust me. But whatever, however it might be helpful to you. So enough of the opening ceremonies. Let's kind of get into the heart of the Olympics here. Talking about AI skills for development testing. So not news to any of us, right? AI is on the tip of our tongues in virtually every conversation that we have, and whatever role we're playing, whether it's platform engineering or infrastructure or operations or planning and product management, development, test, and you name it. We're talking about AI and how we leverage it, or maybe what it means to our work, to our jobs, all those kinds of things. But it's also not new. We've been doing AI for a while, right? In our software development, we've had tools and products in our work environment that has already been using AI and machine learning, and now introduction of copilots and things like that for generative AI. So first question I wanted to just open things up with, it's a great way of kind of knowing where we're each coming from and our perspectives on AI. Is anytime I work with a new technology or a new process, you kind of walk away some initial ahas, like, oh, that's interesting. You're like, okay, the cloud isn't just somebody else's computer. It's a different way of how I think about infrastructure and what I might do with it, right? So for AI, maybe if you would share what any kind of insights you've picked up about AI and how that's impacting development and testing, DevOps, et cetera, all those different roles. So I'm going to pick a random person, spin the wheel of DevOps Unbound, tick, 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 and Lisette, you came up first.
Yes, I love this question because it make you think a little bit like, what is the goal of AI? And this is for those folks that are still on the fence, right? Should I use it? Is it going to take my job? I like to think of it as something that is augmented, and that's really because my whole entire reason why I got into computer engineering almost 25 years ago was because, somebody showed me what AI could do. Like it could just make your life easier. And here we are almost two decade later, and we are the tip of the beginning of how it can help us. So for me, I like to think about it in every aspect, but specifically in software development lifecycle as augmented. And when you go to conference, I go to a lot of conference, I speak at conference, you see assistive power. There's so many words that people are using, but the one that I have felt a little bit more close to my heart and to how I see it being used is augmented, because I feel like it just give you, and I was just talking to my team before this call, the ability to just save time, and empower you a little bit more than just spending time. Because when I was a QA tester, I can come in the morning after I have run my automation the night before, and then I'll spend like literally half of my day after I have my coffee or tea just trying to chase those flaky tests, those tests that fail, and trying to figure out what is the reason why they failed, right? And now we have tools that allow you to just give you a report and tell you why the tool failed, and even autocorrect or auto fix those tests for you. So for me, that's where I get super excited. And when I'm talking about AI to new folks that are interested but not sure, I'm like, just see it as something that's going to augment anything that you're doing. It's not here to replace you, but it's really to help you get better at what you're already doing.
Yeah, I think Lisette, you hit the nail on the head there with the whole, like, is it going to take your job thing? And that's probably important to talk about as well. And we've always heard this, right? When virtualization came out, everybody thought their jobs were going to go away. When automation came out more heavily, everybody was like, my job's going to go away. And it never did. It just kind of horizontally scaled jobs, not necessarily vertically. It was just different problems that we were solving. And I think the same thing with AI. So one of the things that's interesting for me is, like, when LLMs first started to get talked about, everybody was like, oh, they can train themselves. They don't, though, right? They Google data and train themselves on the data that exists. So that's going to open up a plethora of jobs within itself, right? Because we're going to have the ability to feed it real data, not, don't put glue on your pizza for the cheese to stick like we saw a couple weeks ago. That's a good way to think about that. We definitely need more jobs in the AI space. So I just wanted to touch on that really quick.
Look over those recipes from Gemini and tell you to make sure they're cool, right? No glue on my pizza. I'm sorry to jump in. Lisette or David, jump in. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think Lisette, that's exactly where my mindset is with it too. There's a quote floating around, and not to quote it directly necessarily, but she's basically saying, I don't want AI to do the creative and fun stuff for me so that I have more time for my laundry and my chores. I want AI to do my laundry and chores so I have more time for the creative and fun stuff. And I think that's here as well, right? How can I eliminate or reduce the time and the effort I need to do these tedious tasks that still need to be done, and slow down this overall development process that I have? But if I can augment them, right, if I can accelerate them through the use of AI so that I have more time for the actual innovative stuff and entertaining stuff, overall the process becomes stronger. So I think just in that same kind of space, it makes sense of discussing how we actually want to use it, and then how do we build it to most successfully execute it on that task.
And I totally agree with you. It's because we're going to consume it. We're probably even going to create the tools. So we are going to be involved in different roles with AI. And as I said, it's not a matter of if nor when. It's like it is already happening. And there are places where this particular tool shines, as Michael was mentioning. Finding patterns, it's going to be, and also Lisette mentioned, it's where it shines. So all this kind of stuff that is bringing us insight in our data, it's going to be easier. The other thing that I see as a full win is sometimes even our checklists were based on previous stories or our previous experience, and now we have a database or a knowledge base that is bigger, that can provide us with even more insights, even in domains that we have not touched in the primary basis.
One of the things maybe it's just my learning style, but I see technology as almost a kinetic sport. In other words, by that I mean get involved, try it, use it to better understand it, whether it's part of my job or, I may never use that again, but at least I kind of understand how it works. Maybe that comes from taking apart my dad's television set when I was 4 and I got in trouble. But anyway, that's another story. I think AI is that way too. What is an LLM? How do you create? How do you talk to it via an API? What can you do? What does the prompt have to look like? How does that work? What are different ways of doing prompt engineering? How might I, put a retrieval augmented generation layer in front to protect data that doesn't go into all those questions about how things work? That's just in the Gen AI world. Of course, there's TensorFlow and PyTorch and any number of tools that have been around for a while now for programming, at least those two being Python kinds of activities. It's a learn and experience it enough to feel like you understand it. And then you can start to say, okay, let's try it on this problem, or I could benefit my work from this. I think that's my biggest learning is AI especially is that way, because some things are just very different than traditional programming languages or technology. It's kind of like learning a relational database when you're used to NoSQL or something. It's a different way of doing things. So I'm curious. So we had a really great question already come in, and please provide us your questions in the Q&A tab. My question is, where do we think it's best applied, AI, in whatever form? In our SDLC, where are the places we think we can get the biggest benefits from? And we should be kind of emphasizing if there's low-hanging fruit there, maybe investing for the future. And the question that came in on Q&A is maybe where shouldn't we? Are the places just like kind of please, let's hold off on that, or that's not good, or we don't know enough yet. So anybody want to take a crack at those two sides of the proverbial coin?
I could if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think number one, the testing phase, maybe not necessarily writing tests, but getting alerts and having an understanding, or automated self-healing in a sense, or automated fixes in a sense. Let's say kind of like what you were saying before. And then the other piece of it is the templating. So there's a lot of code that we write that's like very similar in terms of how we're setting up functions, how we're formatting various libraries that we're using, et cetera. I think AI can kind of come in and formulate that for us. Where I don't think it fits, at least right now, is again the letting it think for itself. Like at least not right now in a particular sense. Because again, it's just going out to the internet and getting information. It doesn't necessarily know how to formulate that information. The way that I like to think about it is, my son is 7. And if I told him, hey, go Google like how to write me an application from start to finish, he may come up with something, but it's like not going to be very valid, at least right now. And that's kind of how I'm seeing LLMs in a sense right now. It'll come up with something, but it won't be entirely valid. So all that stuff that still requires critical thinking, we'll have to more or less be behind the keyboard right now.
Yeah, I don't think that like critical thinking layer will go away anytime soon. There's definitely that layer of validation that's going to be needed to be embedded in your process if you're leveraging Gen AI. Here at Tricentis, we're launching these co-pilots now that are built around Gen AI and how they can, increase your efficiency overall and things like that, right? How can it help you on the code base? Because a lot of code is very formulaic. And if we can generate some of that code for you automatically, does that open the door for someone that's not as familiar with coding to, get started into that space, or just save time for someone who is very familiar with coding, who doesn't want to have to go pull those resources again and again and again? We are coming up here in the future trying to move into, let's say, more of a creative space and actually drafting test cases for you. But that need for validation is very key, right? We see it in AI from the generative AI space all the time, right? Like the glue in your cheese for your pizza example, that was pulled from the depths of the internet and wasn't by any means accurate. So there's definitely a drafting stage for our consideration in terms of it's generating these test cases for me. An actual human, an actual person has to go back and read through these and make sure that they are accurate. And when they're not, use that to further train our models so that they are accurate going forward. So I agree with that in the testing space. There's kind of different aspects to it. We have like, AI that's existed for a long time, things that are a little bit more solid now, things like, self-healing and correcting itself going forward. I think those will continue to see improvements with Gen AI. But I think the Gen AI spaces into the things around code and hopefully building tests for us in the future, those are really exciting.
And to your point, the repetitive tasks, I mean, there's so much that we used to have to do, right? Like before virtualization, before automation became a bigger thing, like in the way beginning of my career, I did a lot with PowerShell, and everybody was like way against that in the Windows sysadmin world when it first came out. Like, it's going to take our job and blah, 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 yada, yada. And it just simply freed me up to not have to do the mundane tasks. And so I could worry about other things that were not more important, but at least more important to me, right? So yeah, the removing the repetitive tasks, I think that the whole Gen AI thing, or whatever you want to call it, is just the next logical step.
Yeah, for me, when I talk to individual or company, I like people to think about it in a very organized way. Think about how do you do your work today? And maybe because I'm like lazy in my mind and I just like things to be done easy, right? Like, what is the low hanging fruit, easy task that you do that does not require a keyword critical thinking? Because the time, because when you look at your day, for instance, or look at your process, or you look at your SDLC, at the side, on the side, there's always things that are fairly simple to do that we had to do, like you write test cases, like templatize, your of or doing a formatting thing. Those are things, anything that is low hanging fruit, AI can do that today for you with better accuracy, things that are mundane, things that, like, let's say you have a report, because you guys already talk about the execution of the test case and looking at, but look at your report and trying to tell you maybe how often something fell, the predictability. That is also another way where, I don't like to look at reports and trying to like figure out things on my own, because it's like too repetitive, and if somebody called me in the middle of it, god forbid, then I have to restart that. But you can throw that information to an AI model, and then you spin a lot of more accurate versioning. I was looking at a tool last night where it can just give you a graphic definition of your report. That is super interesting. Now, me as a human, I can now add my critical thinking and tell the story of that report, so but I can get a really good report out of it. So there's various ways. Look at your processes, look at your layer of the work, and look at the low hanging stuff. That's where you usually start, and the rest will just be, it's gonna get better, because somebody mentioned earlier, right? It's almost like Google. It's and another thing that I mentioned is, think about when the internet started. I don't know, 1990, early, when the internet started. Everybody was super wondering, like, how are we going to use the internet? Is that going to give me the right information? And the more I was literally listening to a podcast from a lady that was in real estate, and she was talking about how she created a couple of the first web page on the internet. So think about that time. It's the same thing that we're going through right now. All the data that we are adding to the model is going to train. That's how it's going to get trained and understand better. Prompt engineering is something that people need to get better at, because the better you start prompting your AI tool, that's how you're going to get better answer all the time. So those are things that I usually like to share for folks.
For me, is where it shines is in pattern recognition, analyzing huge amount of data. So that is where you should be doing it. Where you shouldn't be doing it, when you still need a very if there is a very complex domain specific task, then it's totally a human, because he is the only one that has that knowledge, or should be having that knowledge when participating in the projects. The other one, it is exactly not only the main specific, but contextual. Even though systems behave in a similar way, like sometimes we developers are only kidding that we only grab data, transform data, and push data. And most of, like 99% of the systems is about that. As a developers, either you create that or refactor that, but the really amazing projects are the few. So one could say that you have a lot of repetitive tasks in software development, but The other thing, the little bit of shoework or difference there is that it's highly contextual on the culture, highly contextual on the client, highly contextual on the domain. And that is what makes sometimes the difference. So, and that AI so far is not so good. So, high domain expertise, a lot of contextual information that has to be applied to create or accept something, not perfect for analyzing, classifying, and even predicting based on large amount of data.
You know, I think of it as we're in the show me your work, show me your homework phase, right? When you remember when you turn in work in school, college, or especially high school, it's like, well, show your work. How did you get that answer, especially in math? But I want to know that because I want to see how you got that answer and what it was. It may be right, it may not be, but at least I'll understand how you got to some degree where you are, and then we can take whatever corrective course to help get that on track. And at least with generative AI, I think it's very much where we are. I also, though, think about it as, yes, let's help us with the day to day. I'd love generative AI to come up and say, hey, would you like me to create a routine for that, an automation for that? You've kind of done that 4 times already this week or today. But I also think we should experiment and push the boundaries and say, well, what can I do with this? What is it good at? What's it getting better at? If you're working in machine language, right? Kind of keep cracking at it, keep using, PyTorch or something, and try it on a problem and see if that solves it better than the approach, or maybe kind of, expand what you're doing with it. So that's part of kind of advancing the state of the art. It's not just waiting for the technology to catch up or to advance. It's also us advancing in our thinking and thinking about the problem space. So, by the way, we already are all prompt engineers. We do that for Google every day, right? We've been through prompt engineer training. We're just learning a different kind of prompt engineering. So, a little different, but we'll learn it. So we already have a lot of experience doing that. So let's turn our attention to the skills. One of the questions that were asked from one of our audience members is, prompt engineering. Is that something that we should be focusing on in kind of the development and test within our own organizations, dev test environment? Should we be working with other teams, helping them with prompt engineering? Is that a skill for tech folks, or should we be sort of casting a broader net on, this is applicable. These approaches are applicable. You can just apply it to a different domain of a prompt that you're using. Anybody want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, I think that skill is just going to kind of be one of those random skills that we know like the back of our hand. Like same thing with Google, like just like you said, Mitch, there was a time where like you would have to ask a particular question in Google in a particular way, and you still kind of have to get solid results. But now we're at a point where like sometimes I put a question in Google and I go back and I'm like, I don't even 100% know what I was asking, but Google knew what I was asking, right? And everybody's using that outside of tech. Whoever in the world is Googling something and asking a question. Again, to your point, I think that's just prompt engineering, right? Like that's just stuff that we've been doing for the past however long. So I think it's going to be one of those things where it's just automatic, I guess, the best way to think about it. It's just kind of there.
Well, following that example of Google, and I have to say that even people that were not in systems were using file type, like filter by this domain, give me the latest in the 24 months. So even people, when they were provided with one kind of interface, they started to learn the interface to optimize their solutions. And in this case, prompt engineering is one and the most known way of interface with this new tool. So I think we're going to be bound to learn the interface. So prompt engineering, here we come.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a skill set, we're going to have to further develop. We've already, like you said, developed this foundational layer to it. With Google, like in particular, like as much as we were learning how to communicate and navigate Google with our prompts, Google is also learning from us, right? When a person wants to get to this destination and they phrase it this way, now I've known to connect, these two nodes. and they've built that in their system as well. So we're almost like both learning together to reach this center point where we can communicate effectively across that boundary. So I think that will just increase. We see it now even with like ChatGPT, for instance, and like there's lessons now on how to get the most out of your prompts using ChatGPT, and things that you can add on to your prompts to make them more specific to your needs. Those things exist with Google too, right? The average person who's typing their question in to get their answer, they're still getting what they need. But if you want to take it to another layer and give it specific syntax or specific commands to filter out certain information, things like that, those are available to those users too. So I think things with generative AI in particular, like, yes, how strongly we can communicate to it with the prompts will have to become that skill set that we build out. And then for companies that are putting out generative AI based tools or augmented tools, how successfully they can train theirs to interact with the prompts of their users will ultimately determine their success too. We're seeing that now with like our Q-Test Copilot, for instance, that can help you draft these test cases from your requirements. We really need to make sure that how customers are writing their requirements is presented in such a way that our AI Copilot can understand what they're saying with their requirement documentation. So as much as they'll have to potentially adjust how they phrase things, we want to make sure our Copilot is reading how they are starting to begin with. So like I said, kind of meeting in the middle there.
Great. I'm curious. We're in the age of AI augmented or AI generated code, and there's all the questions about copyright and where all that came from that the model were trained on. But I think one of the even more relevant questions for us is, do I have to think about how we integrate with, test, evaluate? How do we know when something's been augmented or generated with AI versus a person wrote it? We don't always know, right? Got checked into GitHub or whatever repository, and are there things we need to know about, or we just treat it like everything else? And if it happened to hallucinate in the middle of some logic, well, we'll figure that out too. What are your thoughts about that? It seems like a big open question.
Yeah.
At least it is for me.
Yes, for me it is as well, because I'm really process driven, and what I caution leaders in company is, yes, use it, right? But just like anything else, let's make sure we have code review. We have the process. We have coding best practices, because these are just not. Even if it's testing code, these are actually coding for solution, right? And from my tester mind, I'm always paying attention to the output, the outcome of this code, right? So let's continue to have a best practice in place, and where it gets scary is folks get wild, right? Folks are like, okay, now I have a Copilot, I have all these tools, I'm just gonna get a bunch of code, but efficiency still matter, right? And for me, I've always seen coding as the lowest of the pole of actually software development. It's actually the easier thing you can do. So now I think talking about augmented, I want developers specifically, or anybody that code, to spend more time, architecturing, using that augmented code that they're getting to actually do better job, and then make sure they spend time to follow the best practice, so they can actually output some beautiful code that does the job that the solution is trying to get to, instead of just be lazy, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, it's spot on, honestly, with that. And I agree. The entry point is writing the code, right? Like, I can teach anybody how to write code. That's straightforward. I can't teach anybody how to architect a solution. And I think that's where, again, like the whole generative AI thing comes into play, and just removing those mundane tasks. Well, one thing that comes to mind is, I don't know if everybody's ever heard of that tool, Kate's GPT, but essentially it's like a troubleshooter for a Kubernetes environment. So instead of me, for example, having to run kubectl logs and kubectl describe or kubectl events for the 100,000th time in my terminal, I just use Kate's GPT and it scans my environment for any errors that are occurring, any warnings, etc. I still need to go and figure it out but I don't have to do the mundane thing of kubectl logs, kubectl describe. It just removes that layer for me, which is, I think that's what we want the whole AI thing to be in this context, right?
That's a really good
For me,
example. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've used it for is, you mentioned templates, Michael, and that's earlier. Sometimes templates are just a straw person. Like, give me a starting point, right? I think I know how to solve this problem, but I'm looking for some better ways, or maybe I don't know how to solve it. And so write me an example of how I would create that. And you can throw the whole thing away and take a few ideas out of it, or you can use it as the basis of starting a structure and go fill it out and fill out the 20 to 80% left that you've got to do. But it sure helps to have a starting point instead of a blank IDE tab going like, okay, so I need to import these libraries, and then what do I do next to get this thing rolling?
Yeah, we're seeing it too within the area we're trying to expand to as well, not just in like generating the code for you, but reviewing your code, right? Maybe this was code written by somebody else. Help explain it to me, because I can't really determine what they're doing here, but make it make sense. Or even like fixing code. If there's errors in the execution of a test, for instance, the code that's been built on, can it identify gaps for us? And again, kind of leveraging those sides of it to further teach it how to better successfully generate code on its own. I think there's different areas of that where it can be expanded, where its usefulness is maybe a little bit more clear and its trust is a little bit higher, but then we can still leverage those avenues to further its success in the overall code generation side.
Question for you, David, regarding that. Do you think, because this is something that you're building as we speak, do you think it's good to have kind of like gates on where it can search for the information? So for example, let's say you want to write some Python code or whatever, and you want that Python code, whether it's a test template, whatever, to give you like a description, like, oh, I'm using this block for this, I'm using this block for that. Do we also want to tell it, for the LLMs to pull in information, you should only look at the official docs. You shouldn't look at Reddit, or you shouldn't look at whatever. You should only look at these 3 places to be able to pull these descriptions. So more like gatekeeping in a sense.
I think that's key realistically, right? The context of what you're trying to build and what you want it to pull data from is always going to be important with generative AI. I think maybe Lisette was mentioning that earlier as well. We saw it with Google's failure recently, right? They pulled in $70 million worth of data from Reddit, and anybody can post anything on Reddit. It's not necessarily accurate information, and the years and years of trust that Google has built up as the search engine, and being able to navigate you to your destination of correct information was kind of foiled a little bit there for the last couple of weeks, because it was pulling ridiculous results. So similarly, as we execute our AI strategy, we try to be, we started moving towards it, and actually we took a pause last year and said, wait, before we go too far down this route, let's make sure we're doing this correctly. We're doing this securely. We are going to be able to, train our models appropriately so that they are effective and safe for our customers to use. That was always a priority. And so now that we've, reinvigorated our AI plan this year, it's really with that foundational level or layer that we've built upon, because I think that's ultimately as important as possible.
And that's a trend that we are seeing a lot of companies doing, not only in testing, but also in trying to reach into their data and extract information from it, like really insights into it. So now it's going to be a question of how either we retrain our models to our data, or we create these vector databases to actually start using our data with some kind of curation process and validation. So this is something that is going to happen either at the company level, or at the organizational level, or even at the specific domain level. So I'm hopeful, like we are right now in the wow phase of the tool. We haven't reached the trust but verify stage. I mean, for me, what you were all mentioning makes sense. This is the moment where I can ask somebody that can pretend to wear so many hats, that helps me get inspired about different things. instead of going and asking 10 different persons, I only ask one prompt that can pretend that has 10 different hats. So that dialogue that I'm creating, it's allowing me to think a little bit outside the box from my perspective.
Who does that responsibility fall on? I'm curious. Like, so for example, if we're thinking about ChatGPT, like that's very much a B2C solution at this point. You know, you see people on the news that have never written a line of code in their life talking about ChatGPT and AI, right? Like it's a thing now. So with that gatekeeping, I mean, like, are we expecting OpenAI, for example, to put a feature in ChatGPT to toggle, all right, don't pull data from Reddit, don't pull data from here, don't pull data from there? Is it their responsibility, or is it almost like our responsibility in a sense to build data models on particular locations? I don't know. It's a good question, I guess.
It's our responsibility, and it's twofold, because our responsibility meaning like SDLC, folks that make software, folks that make product, folks that make things that are on the internet. That's what I mean. And the second part of the responsibility is tester, and that's why when I'm talking to tester, I'm looking at them right in the face and say, your job is not going away, because now your job is even more complex, in a way, because now you have to worry about the data, you have to worry about the accuracy, you have to worry about it's the solution actually doing what is meant to do. So you have to even sometimes worry about the sources. I was talking about to somebody yesterday, we were talking about the AI model, and the customer don't want them to use AI to verify it's a threat model. They don't want, the customer doesn't want them to use AI to do that, but they are using AI. But now they need to add a man in the middle, like a last step of like human actually doing the verification. So that is, and it's open to us again, SDLC, to define our process and say, this is how I'm using AI today. This is how human beings are involved into it. I'm not replacing, and define who is doing what. And as the model is augmenting it, we also inform it. Because I am not going to trust OpenAI or anybody else that make anything. They might, to make the tool better. It's a wonderful idea you just mentioned, Michael. Love it if they can tell me minus this other, filter this other one. That would be cool. But I think each organization, enterprise level, we really need to take care of our own model and how we use it internally. Because I mean, you have like banking system, you have like healthcare, and you have like cybersecurity company that are using this to just go through so many data. So it's going to be open to the responsibility of organization.
So I wonder where that gray line is. I'm sorry, I don't mean to continue down this rabbit hole, but I'm just really curious on everybody's opinions, including the listeners. So for example, like ChatGPT went down yesterday, right? And it just so happens that a lot of vendors' AI services also went down. So companies are using ChatGPT on the back end, right? But then at the same time, standard regular people are using ChatGPT. So where's the gray line between if organizations are using it and it's up to them to manage the data, but they're pulling the data from elsewhere? Okay, so it's their responsibility. But then at the same time, is it the news person's responsibility that doesn't know how to write code to manage it as well? Because they're both using the same thing. So it's like, where is that gray line? I feel like that's a topic within itself, but now the gears are turning.
Yeah, I think
I will just give a simple answer, like, what did we do for the internet? Because for me, I see so many similarity with the internet. It's because it's so fresh and we have been so deep in the internet. There was some problem that we were trying to resolve, some regulation, that we solve it. So it's the same thing. So all your questions are valid. It's just the solution can be mirrored to what we did back then or not. I don't have the right solution, but I think those are problems that we will encounter.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and for anyone leveraging Gen AI, but especially if they're leveraging someone else's model like ChatGPT from OpenAI and stuff, I think if they have that level of trust in that solution to incorporate it into their own, then I guess we hope that they're still doing their gates and their checks and their validations to make sure that it's still meeting the need that they need it to serve within their own product line. Obviously, incorporating someone else's might be easier, at the beginning in terms of, rather than building your own. But it's not like a one and done, now I can just use this and they're going to do all the work for me. You still have to make sure that it's, secure and accurate, right, within your own usage, within your own products. And I don't think that validation layer will ever, like I said, go away anytime soon, or if ever. I think it might just change as time goes on, but there'll always be some level of doubt, is this correct? Does this need to be double checked? And as testing, Lisa, like you were saying, it's not necessarily going to go away. It's just going to change. We might not have to do, build the automation ourselves, but now we're going to be testing to make sure the automation is accurate to, actually coming back with that passing result, but it actually did the steps that we wanted it to, and things like that. So that security layer will always be there, I think.
Let me ask you a good question that we had one of our folks, Jessley, put in our Q&A. And that is, what's our responsibility for what's created with AI? I mean, there was a company who said, I won't name the companies, who said, well, that's the AI chatbot. That's not us. We're not responsible for what it created. Well, yeah, you created it. Maybe it wasn't all your technology. In the security world, there's this thing called shared responsibility, which is when you use the cloud. The cloud provider has some responsibility for security. So does the software that you use or services. But it doesn't mean no responsibility. All of that responsibility still falls on you, even if you're relying on something else or someone else to secure it for you. Isn't that kind of the same thing with AI? I mean, we're still accountable for, if Mitch puts some wacky code in there, Mitch put that wacky code in there.
I mean, this conversation, it's so much into open source and security and managing dependencies in a secure way. So, and I would just said, I mean, the problem of provenance, the problem of the quality assurance, the problems of guarantees, we have faced it in other topics inside technology. We haven't solved it that perfectly fine. I mean, we're still discussing about SFOX, about CVEs, about CVSSs, but now it's more into the language of more developers. So that's a step forward. With AI, we will have all these conversations since the beginning, which I see as a really hopeful thing, because now these hard questions like who is in charge, that the data is not even, like, for example, being used inappropriately from others or things like that. We are already asking those questions. Like, we don't have the answers, but at least they are not in the dark. We're not in the dark about the risks, at least.
Yeah, Mitch, I wanted to touch on what you said earlier. I think it's 100% our responsibility. So just as an example, if I deploy an application stack in US East 1 or East US 1 in Azure, AWS or whatever, and I put it in that one availability zone and my application goes down, I can't say it's the cloud's responsibility because I messed up. I didn't do multi-AZ, right? Or I didn't do multi-cloud or whatever. I think it's the same thing here. Like we saw yesterday when ChatGPT went down, a lot of vendors just so happened to have their AI services go down as well. So then we have to think about, like, what does DR look like? Well, what is high availability look like? Is it using multiple different chatbots? Is it using 2 different chatbots and then creating your own for kind of like a 3-prong DR? I don't really necessarily know the answer to that. It's probably a mixture of all of it. But
become like a multi-AI model.
Right, exactly.
In your other, but I want to chime in. Somebody asked a wonderful question, because I think the question is giving the answer. What is the role of leadership in this? Yes, the key word is leadership, like, and that's when I'm talking to leader, I'm like, this is the moment to really, if you never have any process before and you were just winging it, and now you're gonna add AI model into your SDLC, you might want to stop a little bit and really define what you are doing. Because because I work a lot with startup, usually, there's almost no processes, we just running to create product, and hopefully, one day we'll figure it out, our processes. So the answer over there is really leadership. It's going to be super important for leader to determine and have some guardrail from the get to go. I will really think that will be the way to approach it. Otherwise, you're gonna get in a lot in trouble. Your customer is not gonna trust you because we haven't talked about it today, but AI and trust is something that you have to nurture, and you can lose trust really quickly.
Let me phrase this question this way too. I'm glad you brought this up, Seth. Some of it's personal style, some of it, risk taking, whatever it might be. But I can phrase the question this way because I, as a leader, right, I have to faced with these questions at time. Sometimes leaders, when not sure what to do or are risk adverse, will say, no, we're not going to use that. Let's let other people kind of live on the bleeding edge and we'll learn and then we'll decide. And other leaders will sort of just kind of ignore it, say, I don't know. I didn't say we should or shouldn't do that. Just people are doing whatever. And sometimes that works out. Sometimes it doesn't. If you as a leader or you for your leader in an organization that you work in, how would you like them to be laying out AI, how we should, with the role of AI in our organization and in our work? What would you like your leaders to be doing, either whether they're doing it or not? Here's your chance to talk to your boss, but their boss isn't here. They'll never hear this. Be careful what you say.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily risk adverse. It's one of the reasons why I'm self-employed, because I just kind of dive into things and say, oh, whatever's going to happen, right? It'll take the bank at least 6 months to take my house. It's fine. We'll be all right. So
recover.
So yeah, I mean, I think I like to think about it like calculated risk in a sense, like I would hate to ever work in an organization where it's like, no, let's not do this. Let's, wait 5 years or whatever, right? It's why I had a really brief stint in government where I only lasted about 6 or 7 months because I couldn't deal with the red tape. So I would say that there has to be some type of like calculated risk in a sense. You should kind of know what you're getting yourself into, but if you're 20 to 30% of the way there of knowing, I think you're all right to just kind of move the needle a little bit and see what happens.
Good. Who else?
For me, I would say my style is mostly inspiring, and also asking people, and that's what I've done in the past, asking people to try it. Because I was working for a company where we start using AI super early, like 2016, So it was really about, let's give it a try. Just like we were trying automation, let's give it a try, telling them the story or the reason why we're using it. It's really to augment it. I was using that word even back then before it became like a buzzword. Just give it a try. And the idea is not to replace your job. And the last step is really documenting what are we doing today. Those were the 3 things that I used, to get my team interested. Did everybody agree? No. But the one that agree were a good pilot for us to get it started and get the rest of the organization super interested in our result and want to also use it until today. So I think it depends on your style, but because why are you in technology then? Because we're talking about tech folks normally, right? We are curious by nature, at least I am. We are excited about fresh new toy. So this is, and there's nothing like when you ask developer tester to just test something or try it, because you can only find out if it's good or not by trying it. So it's almost like what Google does, right? They give people 20% of the time to just try a new thing. It's the same concept that we were doing back then. So, because I think somebody else asked another question I saw earlier, like training people in the organization using, should people spending more time now getting trained on AI stuff instead of doing their work? It's really going to depend on what your organization is doing, and it's also going to depend on you from your career perspective. Because you can be in an organization, as Mitch is mentioned, right? Like the leader is like, nope, we're not using it. I don't want to try. But you as an employer is hearing all your friends talk about AI, and you are interested. What are you going to do? That's the question. So it's not only about your own investment in your career, because that's the future, but it's also what the companies do. But I always go with my own self investment, what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's why I'm self-employed too. Back to Michael.
Yeah, that's basically what we recommend as well, right? You have to get in it, you have to try it. Mitch, like you were saying, you like to explore it and take apart your TV, for instance. You have to have that experience to determine, like you said, if this will work for you, how you can put it to work for you, right? How can it augment the work that you're doing today? And so, yeah, so we recommend the same thing, right? Find a pilot project for it, something small, something low risk, something that you can build in those checks and balances to make sure that it's working appropriately, and just see how it works, see what areas it can, accelerate your process with.
However, there are upsides to breaking your parents' TV, which is we got a new TV. So, but anyway, shall we go ahead?
Yeah, for me, it's try it. It's going to be a tool that we're going to see and use and participate on. So it's the best that you start interacting with it, learning more about it, and finally benefiting from it.
Very good. Well, we're coming up on in a time here. Just one thought I want to share. Once in a while, you make a good decision, maybe purely by accident, but it just works out to be a good thing. And that happened to me with DevOps when the first time we implemented it in our IT organization that I was leading. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't really sure what it was either. I kind of had an idea, but nobody was an expert. And so rather than outsourcing the expertise to say, you go figure it out, well, I'll follow you, we got together as a team and we actually learned it together, and we talked about what we wanted to try. And we more importantly talked about what we were learning. Try that worked. Okay, let's go try this. And the folks that are a little more risk adverse can kind of hang back and say, when I'm ready, I'll participate, I'll jump in. And other folks that are, the Michaels of the world who, kind of said, is that boundary? What boundary? We're going to keep going here and see what we can do with this. But the thing of it is we raise the expertise and the knowledge of the whole team by working together on it. Doesn't mean that that's our full-time job now, but it's something that we worked on and eventually became part of our work. It just happened that way. And so that's kind of my thought about AI. It's a team sport, and let's figure it out together. If you got the boss that says we'll never do anything like that ever, well, you need a different boss, in my opinion, but that's a whole nother problem. So anyway, so I'd like to thank all of you. What a great panel. A lot of fun. So much fun talking with you about this. Both your experiences and kind of the unknown, right, about AI and how this affects development, test, and all of our work. So thanks for joining us. Please, everybody, take that AI and DevOps survey, the link that's at the top of the chat. We'd love to get your feedback on that. And we have more programs. If you want to watch one of the recorded episodes on DevOps Unbound, you can find it on Techstrong.tv. And of course, we'll have another roundtable coming up soon. So live roundtable. My special thanks to Lisette and Excel and David and Michael, and to you, Jared, for helping us put this all together. So I'm going to hand the baton, in the spirit of the upcoming Olympics, I'm going to hand the baton to you. You're on mute.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you, Mitch. Just to go off of what you've already said, everyone, go ahead and fill out the survey in the resource tab on the left side of your screen. It's your input is invaluable. It helps us direct and guide our upcoming programs and how we can improve and continue making great content for you. We will email each of you a copy of today's session shortly. And we just want to thank Tricentis for sponsoring today's learning experience, and to thank all of our panelists for taking the time to join us. It's been a pleasure having you. Thank you again. I'm going to go ahead and close out.